Welcome to the InSession Film Podcast for June 16th, 2013. This is episode 17, and I'm JD Duran.
And I'm Nate Parsons.
So Nate, Superman is finally back on the big screen.
And the end result is something pretty super.
My mother! What have you done to me?
My parents taught me to hone my senses on. Focus on just what I wanted to see. Without your helmet, you're getting everything. And it hurts, doesn't it?
Well, Nate, this week we are finally going to be reviewing Man of Steel, which I know you've been looking forward to forever now. We're also going to be checking out and reviewing the new comedy that came out earlier this week, This Is the End. And then we're also going to go into our top 3 movie reboots, kind of going off of the new Man of Steel theme this week. And then we're going to top off the show with some news and some movies we've seen this week as usual. We will finish our Before series, I promise. I know we've put it up for a few weeks now, but I did get a chance to see Before Midnight, and Nate is going to get a chance to see it this next week. So we will review that next weekend on the podcast. But Nate, before we get into it, how was your week?
My week was pretty awesome. I finally got to see Man of Steel. So Twice, yeah. So it was a great week.
Yeah, my week was pretty good. It was very busy. This week was a little bit crazier than normal. I mean, I feel like I watched a ton of movies this week, comparatively to usual, and was in the theater 5 times this week, Nate. Seeing This Is the End twice, Man of Steel, Before Midnight, and our extra film segment that we'll do later with Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark. So
yeah, I was in the theater 4 times.
4 times. So for you, Before Midnight was the only one you didn't get a chance to see. So we'll get you caught up with that next week. But so Man of Steel is directed by Zack Snyder, David Goyer, Christopher Nolan, and stars Henry Cavill, Amy Adams, Michael Shannon, Russell Crowe, and a whole lot of other people that we'll get into in here in just a little bit. Nate, I know you've been dying to see this movie for a long time. You've been harping on it on this podcast for forever, and so many different segments that we've talked about. So Nate, I know people have seen your video review, seen your review up on the website. Let them know, what did you think of Man of Steel? Did it live up to your expectations?
Did it live up to my expectations? Well, I've seen it twice already, so I believe that answers your question.
Yes.
Yes, I loved it. It was everything I hoped for, everything I wanted. It's probably the best superhero comic book movie I've seen to date. I mean, it just really had everything I was looking for. Just great story, solid performances. The visual effects and action were out of this world. But the story was really what I liked the most out of the whole thing. The way it was told. I mean, it starts out on Krypton with the birth of Kal-El and the destruction of Krypton, and then it fast forwards to an adult Clark Kent who's kind of now a drifter. We see him, the first time we see him, he's on a fishing boat, and then as he's kind of on his journey to find out who he is and where he's from, we kind of get flashbacks of key moments throughout his life that have kind of shaped him, like him first discovering his powers and using them for the first time, and him first finding out where he's from and whatnot. And I just love the way that was all pieced together.
Yeah. Well, before I get into my, I guess, little spiel of the movie, the first thing I'll say is I liked it. I didn't love it. And Nate, before you start throwing punches at me, let me go into a little bit of what I mean by that. I experienced this movie in two different ways. The first half of the movie, I didn't really care for a ton, or it wasn't as good as the latter half of the film. The second half, I did enjoy a lot more. Where I kind of fell apart with some of this is in the story. I know you like the story, and I like the overarching story arc that you get here there's a whole scene of where they start the movie in Krypton, and with Russell Crowe, who plays Superman's dad, his real dad back on his home planet, Jor-El. And I love how they did all that. How all of that is put together is amazing. The scene where he is saying goodbye to his son is one of my favorite moments of the whole film. Mm-hmm. And I loved all of that. That was, in fact, the music we played as we introduced the podcast this week, it was from that scene. I loved it. I mean, I loved how Hans Zimmer enhanced it there, but I loved Russell Crowe's performance. All of that is fantastic. And I loved how they were able to piece that in, and all that was great. But as the story kind of goes on, especially in the first half of the film, I didn't really care for the pacing. I felt like it was very, very quick. There was very little character development. I feel like with Zack Snyder, he was expecting you to know these characters. And when you're doing a reboot and you're doing sort of an origin story in some ways, I don't know if I feel like you can assume that people know these characters, especially in a generation where Superman and these movies aren't necessarily very popular. And we haven't seen a good Superman film in a long time. And I feel like that's where Zack Snyder was going for. It was just very, very underdeveloped, especially in terms of the characters. I felt like a lot of the emotion was forced, especially with Superman's mother back on Krypton. I just didn't really go into any of that. And when they finally have this moment between Zod and Russell Crowe's character, there's a fun little fight sequence that is there, and General Zod is kind of captured, and all of that is flown by so quickly. I feel like it all happens within 60 seconds between his capture and then him kind of put into whatever. I mean, he just kind of put into jail essentially. And it just flies by so fast. Now, that being said, when we're in that moment, I did love the performances there. Like, I loved seeing Michael Shannon as General Zod. That was cool. And I loved how he was able to bring that character to the forefront. You knew what you were getting with General Zod with those little moments that we had with him there. And I love that. But as the story kind of went to Earth and the story just kind of goes by a little bit more quickly, I feel like the film started to kind of lose its soul a little bit. And especially with how they did the relationship between now Clark Kent and his parents on Earth, I feel like was just completely underdeveloped. There was only a few scenes, as you mentioned, there are some flashbacks where you're starting to get to where he, as a kid, is starting to wonder who he is and why is he different from everybody else and all that sort of stuff. And there's a really cool scene with his mother that I really liked, and that was pretty interesting. And that going forward with that was great, especially considering his mom sort of plays a bigger role toward the latter. For the entire version of our podcast, be sure to subscribe to us on iTunes or on Stitcher, or check us out online at InSessionFilm.com.